Most people think learning is about memorizing. They believe if they can just cram enough facts into their head, they'll be smart, successful, and ahead of the crowd. But here's the truth. Memorization is a trap. It's the slowest, most painful way to learn, and it's why most people never get ahead. You see, the world doesn't reward people who can repeat information. It rewards those who can use it, explain it, and make it their own. Geniuses don't memorize. They play with ideas until those ideas become a part of them. They don't just store knowledge, they transform it. Let me ask you, when was the last time you tried to learn something new? Did you read it, repeat it, and hope it would stick? Or did you try to explain it out loud as if you were teaching a child? Because that's the genius method. If you can't explain it simply, you haven't understood it. And if you haven't understood it, you haven't learned. Most people are afraid to look stupid. They hide behind complicated words, thinking it makes them sound smart. But the real sign of mastery is simplicity. If you can break down a complex idea into clear, direct words, you own it. If you can't, you're just pretending. Here's the secret. Every time you learn something new, don't just store it in your head. Speak it out loud. Teach it. If there's no one around, teach it to yourself. Talk to yourself in your room, in the car, while you walk, even in the shower. Turn thoughts into words. When you can speak clearly and naturally, as if you were explaining it to someone else, that's when the knowledge becomes yours. Listen carefully. There's one infallible sign that someone truly understands an idea: the ability to make it simple. Anyone can hide behind complicated words, but only those who really understand can explain with clarity. If you can't explain it simply, you haven't understood it. Repeating complex terms might impress the uninformed, but it doesn't fool reality. If you can't simplify it, you don't master it. When a concept still feels confusing, tangled with too many loose details, the problem isn't the subject itself. The problem is how you organized it in your mind. But when you can take that same concept and translate it into direct, logical, and accessible words, then you've reached true understanding. Simplicity doesn't weaken knowledge. It strengthens it. The simpler it is, the more essential. The more essential, the more unforgettable. Information stops being a burden you carry and becomes a tool you can use anytime. That's why the greatest scientists, philosophers, and geniuses always sought clarity. They knew the mind doesn't need to drown in complexity. The mind needs to see the structure. When you learn to do this, you don't just understand better. You never forget. That is the path of real learning. Not accumulating words, but distilling until only what matters remains. Every time you explain something, you strengthen your mind. It's like a muscle that doesn't grow at rest, but under challenge. Explaining is that challenge. It forces the brain to organize, review, connect, and test what it has learned. Think about it. When you only read or listen, you're in a passive position. It's as if information flows through you without taking root. But when you force yourself to teach, even if it's only to yourself, your mind changes gears. You leave the passive mode and enter the active one. You're no longer just receiving. You're producing, creating clarity. And here's the magic. In this process, the brain reveals what you still don't understand. If you get stuck, if you can't explain a detail, that means you've uncovered a gap in your knowledge. And that's wonderful, because now you know exactly where to improve. You're no longer in the dark. At the same time, Every time you manage to explain something clearly, something powerful happens. The knowledge sticks. It takes deep root. It stops being a temporary visitor and becomes a permanent part of your mental structure. That's why once you explain something well, you'll rarely forget it afterward. This cycle, learn, explain, correct, and fix, is what accelerates your growth in any area. The more often you repeat it, the stronger your mind becomes. It's like training every day. With discipline, you reach results that seem impossible to those who never practice. And this is exactly how the greatest thinkers reach the level of genius. They didn't memorize. They didn't pile up dead information. They turned explanation into their training ground. And with every explanation, they became faster, clearer, and deeper. Now, I want you to understand something fundamental. This method shouldn't be used only once in a while. It must become a daily habit. The secret isn't in long study sessions, but in constant repetition, in training your mind during small intervals. You don't need hours of absolute silence or perfect conditions. On the contrary, great learners use any moment. If you're waiting for a bus, explain quietly what you just studied. If you're walking, teach yourself the concept you learned earlier that morning. If you're alone in your room, speak out loud as if you were giving a lesson. These stolen minutes of the day are hidden treasures. Most people waste them getting lost in useless distractions. You, however, can use them as a training ground for your brain. It's in these moments that knowledge solidifies because you're not just reviewing, you're organizing and simplifying. But understand this, you don't need to be perfect. Many times you'll stumble, forget, get stuck. And that's exactly where the power lies. Those stumbles reveal the gaps you still need to strengthen. With each attempt, you come back sharper, clearer, more confident. When this becomes a habit, something extraordinary happens. You start to think differently. Your mind becomes trained to see clarity in everything. You begin to organize ideas automatically, to separate the essential from the unnecessary, to communicate better without effort. And all of this is born from simple minutes scattered throughout the day. This is how a sharp mind is built, not through endless hours of forced memorization, but through small, constant rituals of explanation, a little every day, anywhere, always. So here's your challenge. For the next week, every time you learn something new, explain it out loud. Teach it to yourself. Make it simple. Make it clear. And watch how fast you start to learn like a genius.